So to start out with, I am the good shepherd. I thought it would be fun. Try a little bit of Simon Says. If you know Simon Says, if Simon says to do something, you do it. If he doesn't say Simon Says, you don't do it. So I'm going to invite you all to join me in Simon Says. So if you want to play, go ahead and stand up. All right, all those who are standing, you're out because Simon didn't say Simon Says. Yes. Simon Says, whoever wants to play, stand up. Well, some of you who are out standing up again, I don't know about that. Okay. All right, so touch your head. All right, Simon says touch your head. Simon says pull your ear. You put your arm down and touch your chest. All right, Simon says touch your nose. Simon says touch your belly button. Simon says lift your hand up. Wave it really fast. Wave, if you're waving your out. All right, let's go. You can sit down. And you're all out. Actually, so I would say, wow, you're kind of great at that game. It's amazing. Awesome. So today we are continuing our series through these I am statements that Jesus made throughout the Gospel of John. You see, in the sense Jesus is saying I am and reflects back to when Moses wandered through in the wilderness and he asked God what his name was, and God said, I am that I am. So Jesus is embracing this imagery of God. He's taking on the name of God, but also expanding that so we have a better understanding of who he is and who God is and how God is at work through Jesus. So first, Jesus says to the woman at the well, he says, I am he. He's saying, I am the Messiah. I am the Christ. I am the one that you have been waiting for. You don't need to go and worship God now in the temple or on a mountain. You can now worship God in spirit and in truth, in your heart and in your mind. And then he fed the 5,000, and they came back to him wanting more bread. And he says that I am the bread of life. I am that true meal, the true sustenance, what you truly need to make it through the day. You don't need food as much as you need me. So come to me. Then he said, I am the light of the world. And our world is in darkness. And I am bringing the light. Light that helps you see God. Light that helps you see the darkness of your sin. Light that helps you walk in a path to follow him. And today we're looking at this one where Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. I am the good shepherd. Now, I have to make a confession. I don't know that much about shepherds and sheep. Not a big person. I haven't spent much time with that. I remember probably my first stuffed animal was a stuffed sheep named Mr. Barkley. I had him. I don't even know how he got his name. I think his tag said Mr. Barkley. That's how he got his name. I don't remember much. I haven't seen him in many years. I haven't seen him since high school. Somehow he got lost in a move or something. Of course, as a kid and as a parent, I've spent plenty of times at petting zoos. Discovered that sheep aren't as fluffy and cozy as you think they might be. They're kind of dirty and not that exciting, smelly, right? So then my first true experience with a shepherd was driving through Romania. Here we go. Here's a picture of it. We were driving through Romania with some friends, and there was a shepherd there. We just kind of drove along, we took a picture and kept going. Didn't really meet the guy. We know who the shepherd is. He's got sheep around him. He doesn't look like the shepherd we think from the Bible, but Romania is not Israel. But that was really my only experience. I never really didn't get out and talk to the person. I don't know much about what his life was like. But most of what I know about shepherds comes from, especially being around the church at Christmas time. You hear all about the shepherds. Shepherds out in the fields, keeping watch over their flock by night. And we think, okay, those are shepherds, people with a bunch of sheep living out in the fields. In fact, the Bible is full of shepherds and the sheep metaphors. In fact, we see from the beginning, Adam and Eve's child Abel was the first shepherd. And he brought a sacrifice to God, that faith that God was pleased with, unlike his brother, Cain. Cain got jealous and he killed his brother Abel, the shepherd. And then we see God calling Abraham, who was a shepherd, and his people were shepherds. In fact, his grandson, Jacob, who was always in conflict with his older brother, left and he saw the woman of his dreams. And he worked 14 years as a shepherd to marry this woman. And his children then became shepherds. And it was his children that were out in the fields when they saw one of their younger brothers, Joseph, coming. Their younger brother that they didn't like, and so they faked his death and shipped him off to Egypt. God's people then spent 400 years in Egypt. During that time, Moses was born. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's palace in a prestigious life. But then, in a rage, he killed a man, and he then, fearing for his own life, he ran away. He went and lived in the wilderness. And during that time, during the 40 years, while he was out there by himself, he became a shepherd. And that's where he saw the burning bush, and God called him to be the shepherd for his people, to lead them out of Egypt. And then there's probably the most famous of all shepherds for the Jewish people was King David. David was the youngest of his family. He started and was the family shepherd. He would go out in the field and just watch sheep while his older brothers did other things and went to war and all these things that their older brothers did. And David would eventually become the giant killer and eventually become the king. But as a shepherd, he wrote that beautiful song that most of us know, Psalm 23, which has, "The Lord is my shepherd, I have what I need. He lets me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He renews my life. He leads me along the right path for his name's sake. Even though I go through the darkest valleys, I fear no danger. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." So the Jewish people, they knew about shepherds. They knew this idea that God then used this imagery of a shepherd kind of as a metaphor for the leaders of the Jewish people. And oftentimes the prophets would call out the leaders by referring to them as being poor shepherds. In fact, in Ezekiel cries out, "Woe to the shepherds of Israel, who have been feeding themselves. Shouldn't the shepherds feed their flock? You eat the fat and wear the wool and butcher the fattened animal, but you do not tend the flock. You have not strengthened the weak, healed the sick, bandaged the injured, brought back the strays, or sought the lost. Instead, you have ruled with violence and cruelty." So Ezekiel is saying, you are being poor shepherds. You are abusing the animals and using them for your own needs, your own desires. And he calls them out for being bad leaders. And then this image of this shepherd, this metaphor of a shepherd, is then expanded to the coming Messiah. That this future king that would come. And Ezekiel, just as he continues this prophecy, he ends it with saying that God says, "I will establish over them one shepherd, my servant David," not referring to King David, but a future king that will come. He says that he will shepherd them. He will tend them himself, and he will be their shepherd. And so they knew that this future shepherd was going to come and lead them. In fact, we see at Christmas time as the wise men go to King Herod looking for this new king, this new shepherd that was coming. they say, where is this? And he says, they pull out this prophecy from Micah, and it says, Bethlehem Ephrath, you are small among the clans of Judah. One will come from you to be ruler over Israel for me. His origin is from antiquity, from ancient times. And he will stand and shepherd them in the strength of the Lord, in the majestic name of the Lord is God. So they were waiting for this shepherd to come, the shepherd that had come from ancient times, that would come and bring and lead their people peace. And Jesus, he embraced this imagery of the shepherd. He embraced this idea of him being a shepherd. In fact, when he would be out and he would see crowds of people, often say that he had compassion on them because they seemed like sheep without a shepherd. And if we remember our stories of Peter, after Peter had betrayed Jesus or denied Jesus and felt like there's nothing he could do, Jesus reinstates him by saying, Simon Peter, do you love me more than these? And he said, yes, Lord. And Jesus then said, feed my lambs, shepherd my sheep, feed my sheep. Jesus even embraced this imagery when he was talking about the end of time, when he was going to divide those who follow him from those who don't. He says he would separate them one from another, like a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And then today, as we see, Jesus gets up and he declares to people that I am the good shepherd. So as one who doesn't know that much about shepherding, we can pull some basic job descriptions or basic understandings of what a shepherd does from Jesus' imagery or Jesus, what he's saying to people. First, you see that a shepherd knows his sheep. And he says, I am the good shepherd, I know my own, and my own know me. Back then, shepherds would gather together from different families or different groups. They would bring all their sheep kind of together. But a shepherd would know which sheep were his and which were other shepherds. So the good shepherd knows which sheep are his. And then the good shepherd calls his sheep. As they would be gathered together, all these sheep from different people, he would call out, and his sheep would then come out of the herd, the larger herd, and come to him. It says the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name. So he knows the sheep. And I've seen videos on YouTube. You can probably look it up where people were calling out the sheep and they would do nothing. And then the shepherd would call out and they would all just come to that person. Then it says that the shepherd leads his sheep. He calls them out and then he would take them to where to go next. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. So he leads them away into something new. And as he leads them, the shepherd goes ahead of his sheep. He kind of is walking, keeping an eye out, seeking out what's in front to make sure they're going in the right way. He's taking them the right path. And he goes first and leads the way, goes ahead of them. And finally, the good shepherd protects his sheep. It says the good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. So he sees that his sheep are in danger, so he's going to protect them. We know about the story of David, King David, while he was a shepherd. Talks about how a bear came out to try to attack the sheep. And a lion came out another time and tried to attack the sheep. And David defeated them. He killed them with his sling. And so a good shepherd protects his sheep and he lays down his life for his sheep. So Jesus he's embracing this image of being the good shepherd. In fact, he's doing this in a chance where he's kind of in this conflict. He's surprising conflict with these Pharisees. Okay? And he's calling them out, being poor shepherds, for not doing the job that they're supposed to do, the job that God had given them to lead their people, to lead them closer to God. Instead, they're being like what Ezekiel was being like, leaders that aren't really leading the people. And in our small groups, in the curriculum, the author writes that Jesus creates a contrast between himself and the religious leaders. The Pharisees are identified as those who have come before. They are only self-serving thieves and robbers. Jesus described himself as the shepherd for God's people. And so in the story, as Jesus is explaining that he is the good shepherd, he introduces us to some other characters, some other people that maybe try to have influence on these sheep or try to do different things with these sheep and take these sheep. We see that there are strangers that come, and they says that strangers will call to the sheep, and they will never follow a stranger. Instead, they will run away from him because they don't know the voice of the stranger. So there are many things in our lives, outside voices that are trying to call us. And there are certain things that we know are stranger danger, right? Things that we know we shouldn't go near. And so we hear them calling us, we have no desire to go near those things. But that's not always the case. There's many things that do call to us and do try to pull us away from God. Things that are trying to destroy us and keep us away. These things are thieves and robbers. It says that anyone who doesn't enter the sheep pen by the gate but climbs in some other way is a thief and a robber. All who came before me are thieves and robbers. But the sheep didn't listen to them. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. So there are these voices in our lives that are trying to infiltrate us, to lead us down destructive paths, to pull us away from God, that are trying to kill and destroy us. There are voices even in the church that are trying to pull people away, that are saying things that are against what God wants us to do. I know I've seen plenty of church scandals through my life, watching these big, massive, ministries, and they get knocked down. We see, Jim and Tammy Faye Baker, right? Remember the PTL club and all the financial struggles and the sex scandals and these people trying to gain power and influence, and they begin to pull people away from God. They're actually these voices that come and they're stealing and destroying people's faith. And Jesus is calling out the Pharisees being like that. They're putting undue pressure on people. They're being like these shepherds that Ezekiel spoke against, who are only out for their own interest. And the other group were the hired hands. The hired hands says that the hired hand, since is not the shepherd, doesn't own a sheep, he leaves them and runs away when he sees a wolf coming. Maybe a hired hand might be someone who's doing their best, who's trying to serve the Lord. They're trying to lead people. Oftentimes we put these people on pedestals and we think they're going to be great, but they're fallible. I know, in a sense, I am like a hired hand, right? You say that in the things, I'm the shepherd, but really I'm just helping us, lead us. Really, we need to keep our eyes on the good shepherd, the true shepherd, God. He is the one. So if I say things or do things that are against what God wants me to do or wants you to do, then we know that I am not the true shepherd. And there's so many people that aren't the true shepherd. They're trying to say to follow me, but when problems come along, they leave. They run away. They don't lay down their lives. None of us truly lay down our lives for each other or shepherds, because Jesus is the only one that truly laid down his life, who truly gave up his life completely for us, for all of us. Even Paul admits that he is just a servant. When people are saying, who should I follow? Should I follow Paul, or should I follow Apollos, or should I follow Peter? Paul's like, we're just mere humans. We're just servants, serving God. We're here to help lead you to God, but we're not God. Don't worship us. Worship good shepherd. So by calling himself the good shepherd, Jesus challenged the religious leaders to recognize his identity as the promised one to deliver God's people. Jesus is the one. He is the one. He is the good shepherd that delivers God's people. He's the one that leads us. And as I was preparing this, came across some notes from people that says that Jesus doesn't recognize himself as the great shepherd. He could, he's the greatest shepherd ever. He doesn't say, I'm the great shepherd. As my friend Dan Laberson says, that this idea of greatness suggests a human quest for power. Like if you're going to say you're the great, that means you're trying to gain power, gain control. I remember as a kid, I wrote these stories called Dave the Best because I was thinking, I'm going to be the best, right? It's a superhero, silly story. But we think about these people who have the title the Great, right? Alexander the Great, Catherine the Great, Philip the Great. What makes these people great? I did a little research by typing their name in the computer and Googling it. What makes is a person great? And one website I came to, ranker.com, it says this, all right? So this is just off the internet, you can't totally trust it. It says the lofty title of the great is often bestowed upon those who earned it the hard way, the bloody way. You can't expand borders, conquer armies, or exponentially enhance wealth without breaking a few eggs. Some so-called greats have broken the boundaries, taboos, and social structures of their time. Some have been tyrants, others beneficent caretakers, and still others have been various shades in between. These are people who are striving to have this title of being great. And often these thieves, and these robbers, these people, these voices are trying to pull you away, are trying to say, follow me because I am great. But Jesus says, no, I'm not great. I'm good. I am the good shepherd. And going to what Jesus could have said is in Greek, there are two words for good. There's agathos and kalos. These two words, and when you think about the word good, and you'll see how there's a difference. The first, agathos, is someone who's a high quality, who's efficient, excellent, he's distinguished. So you're good at something, you're very skilled at it. Valerie is skilled at being a pianist. She's a good pianist. Right? And so as Jesus say, I am the good shepherd, I am a successful shepherd. I know how to move my sheep from point A to point B to point C. He's not saying, yes, I'm good, I'm a high quality shepherd. He's going to say, I am not the agathos shepherd, but I am the kalos. Kalos means excellent in nature and character, purity, heart, and life. Honorable. William Barclay would say it's a characteristic of winsomeness, which makes it lovely. It's kindness and graciousness. The good shepherd, according to Dan, says it's beauty in character, excellence in virtue. Jesus is saying, I am the good shepherd. I am a person that's pure in heart and honorable. I am lovely and kind and gracious. I am that good shepherd. And as that good shepherd, I know my sheep. Jesus, he knows each and every one of us. He knows us intimately, deeply. He loves us all so much. No matter our flaws or our failures, he loves us. He knows us so well. He knows each of you more than you know yourself. He knows how many hairs you have on your head. For me, it's not that many. But he knows us. Not only does he know us, he calls us. He calls his sheep to follow him. We see that in the Gospels that Jesus calls to these people, to these fishermen, come, leave your nets and follow me. He goes to this tax collector, Matthew, leave your tax collector booth and follow me. And he calls each and every one of us, come, follow me. Doug, follow me. Judy, follow me. John, follow me. Jane, follow me. He calls each of us, to follow him out of our darkness and into his marvelous light. And then he leads us. He leads his sheep. As we see in Psalm 23, he leads us to all that we need. Not all that we want, but he leads us to what we need. And he leads us down green pastures and quiet waters and along the right paths. And he even leads us through the darkest valleys. And he leads us, as he leads us, he goes ahead of us. He blazes the trail for us. He goes in front of us. And he leads us through life. He leads us through death. He went into death, and he leads us into the new life, into eternity. Jesus has gone ahead of us so we can follow him. And then, as the good shepherd, he lays down his life. He says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. I lay down my life for the sheep. I lay down my life that I may take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down on my own. I love that picture. Jesus says, no one takes it from me. I lay it down on my own. Jesus willingly, by his own choice, laid down his life for us. He wasn't coerced into it. He wasn't forced to lay down his life. It may look like that on Good Friday, but he gave up his life. He laid down his life by his own choice, not out of obligation or duty. As William Barclay writes, Jesus' death was entirely voluntary. Jesus stresses this again and again. He was not the victim of circumstance. He was not like some animal dragged unwillingly without understanding to the sacrifice. Jesus laid down his life because he chose to do so. Jesus was not helplessly caught up in a mashup of circumstances from which he could not break free. He did not lose his life, he gave it. The cross was not thrust upon him. He willingly accepted it for us. Jesus, our good shepherd, he laid down his life. He chose to for each and every one of us because he loves us so much. And even in Hebrews, it says he lays down his life for the joy for him. He endured the cross, despised the shame. There was a joy that he knew would come out of that, a joy that we would get to be with him forever, that we would be able to have an eternal relationship with him. So he laid down his life for this future joy. He endured all that pain, endured all that shame, so that we could be with him forever. So I want to conclude by reading from you a little book. This book is called Found. And it's from the Jesus Storybook Bible. It's an adaptation of Psalm 23. So, as I'll read it to you all. It says, Jesus is my shepherd, and I am his little lamb. He feeds me, he guides me. He looks after me. I have everything I need. Inside, my heart is very quiet. As quiet as lying still on soft green grass in a meadow by a little stream. Even when I walk through the dark, scary, lonely places, I won't be afraid, because my shepherd knows where I am. He's here with me. He keeps me safe. He rescues me. He makes me strong and brave. He's getting things ready for me, especially for me. Everything I've ever dreamed of. He fills my heart so full of happiness I can't hold it all inside. Wherever I go, I know. But it's never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever love will go to. Amen.